Introduce you to the brand. Go Max Chavez.
That's generous, but I appreciate it. That's why
So, yeah.
I'm good. Yes.
You will have to get, yeah.
Very, very green. I like it. Look today.
Thank you. Right. Yeah.
I'm about to start a green shawl for a friend. She said not for green.
Do you want to go later?
Or Kelly. Yeah.
I didn't see it.
Oh, anybody really, I mean, that's not Kelly.
Yeah.
How would you describe the color of your jacket? It's nice. It's a good color. I might have to take-
Almost the sort of feels along the soccer ground side. Big sign.
Last time I made her something, it was more like a color.
So it'll go well. It's good.
Yes. Oh, nice to meet you.
Cheers with Randolph's.
Did you say this person is related to you?
Yeah.
Hey, what's your name? Carson. And this is your son? Carson, very nice to meet you. Are you sure?
Yes.
You want to sit here more?
No. Hey, you're fine there. I'll sit right there. There's like 25 buttons blocking the bridges.
Oh.
To the opera house.
Ah.
A room change here. from regular. Happy holidays, everybody.
Throw you a little on.
Yeah, we just, hello, how are you? Welcome aboard.
You don't have to stand. I mean, you're here. You're kind of.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for speaking out on Swift.
On which one?
On the Swift.
Oh, yes. Yes. Got a marathon when marathon's going.
I know.
Even the guards youngsters are a little confused as to whether it's 201.
Right.
So just.
Someday in history, you may not speak for some.
How are you, sir? Seeing you so. It's great to see you.
The only way you learn something is.
I think you should both. I think the voice.
Wow, you're not shy. I'm just gonna get a form and it's fine.
Oh, really? Sign, everybody sign in.
I'll say some.
So here's the agenda. There we go.
Also, nice to meet you.
Hey, great to meet you.
Yes, sir. Are we live streaming?
Yes, we are, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. I am going to call the meeting to order. This is the Commission on Chicago Landmarks regular meeting. Today's date is December 7th. I'll do the roll call. Vice Chair, Commissioner Dekowitz.
Here.
Commissioner Boatright.
Here.
Commissioner Burns.
Here.
Commissioner Fair. Commissioner Hughes.
Present.
Commissioner Ponce. Okay. Commissioner Rubin.
Present.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Here.
And I am Commissioner Wong. We do have a quorum. I'd like to ask anyone wishing to make a statement on today's agenda to complete a public comment card and give the card to a member of the staff. Comment cards are available at the door as a courtesy to other individuals wishing to offer comments. We ask that member of the general public limit your statements to 3 minutes or less. When the time comes for public comment on the individual item on the agenda, I'll call the names from the cards and ask you to come forward to the microphone to make your statement. Please state your name and indicate the organization or company you represent, if any. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the new acting director of the Department of Planning and Development, and also a new member of our commission, Sierra Boatright. Sierra was the vice president of real estate and community development in Chicago-based real estate firm CRG, where she oversaw high-impact real estate projects and launched the company's philanthropic arm, as well as mentoring program to support commercial developers of color. Before that, she was the vice president of real estate and inclusion for Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, where she managed the planning and development of new projects on the south and west sides, including more than $450 million in new investment involving the 180-acre mixed-use Pullman Park project. Local business publications have named her, and I know this is not all of it, have named her among notable women in commercial real estate, 40 under 40, notable Black leaders and executives, notable executives in color in construction and commercial real estate. She holds a master's degree of urban planning and policy from University of Illinois at Chicago. And a bachelor's in psychology from Hamilton College. Welcome, Sierra. Would you like to say a few words?
No, just thank you, and I'm just excited to be here, excited to lead DPD, excited to sit on this really important commission. So I'm happy.
Welcome on board.
Thank you.
All right. So the first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the previous meeting. Those were included in your packets. Is there any discussion, questions? If not, I'd like to request a motion to approve those minutes. Is there a second?
Second, Commissioner Hughes.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. For the record, I would like to also say that Commissioner Ponce has joined us. Thank you. Here we go. All right. Item number 2 is a report from the public hearing and final landmark recommendation for the Century Building at 202 South State Street in the 34th Ward, as well as a report from public hearing and final landmark recommendation for the Consumers Building at 220 South State Street, also in the 34th Ward. So public hearing was held on November 13th regarding the proposed landmark designation of the Century Building at 202 South State Street and the Consumer Building at 220 South State Street. The commission has received copies of all correspondence submitted, as well as the transcript and exhibits from the public hearing. I served as the hearing officer at the public hearing and would like to share my report. Okay, the public hearing on the proposed landmark designation of Country and Consumers Buildings was held on November 13th at 9 a.m. in room 201A of City Hall. The purpose of the hearing was to gather relevant facts and information to assist the commission in deciding whether the buildings will meet the criteria for landmark designation set forth in sections 2-120-20 of the municipal code. I was the hearing officer on behalf of the commission. Copies of the public hearing, transcripts, exhibits, and correspondence submitted at the hearing has been distributed to commission members. Originals of these documents have been made available to the commission members at the Historic Preservation Division's office. The commission staff presentation recommending the proposed landmark designations were given by Matt Crawford of the Historic Preservation Division staff. At the conclusion of the staff presentations, the commission's rules and regulations allow property owners to become parties to the hearing and or question the staff's presentation. The General Services Administration owners of the property did not request party status and no questions were asked. A statement from the GSA noting its neutrality regarding the designations was read into the record. 12 members of the general public made statements, including 4 representatives of Preservation Chicago, 1 representative of Landmarks Illinois, and 1 representative of AIA Chicago. All were in support of the landmark designation. 1 written statement supporting the designation was submitted by the general public. Altogether, 17 members of the general public signed in and attended the hearing. The total length of the hearing was 1 hour and 33 minutes. The Century and Consumer buildings are each being considered for individual landmark status. As with the report I just made, there are instances when it may be appropriate to discuss the buildings jointly. However, the proposed designations will be considered separately by the commission. First, let's consider the Century building at 202 South Street, State Street, and Candlin, if you could do the presentation, that'd be great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chairman Long. So commissioners, having concluded the public hearing, you may now consider a final recommendation to City Council for the Century building. The Century building was built between 1915 and 1916 and designed by the architectural firm Oliver & Roche. Located at 202 South State Street, it sits at the southwest corner of Adams and State Streets. At your April 13th, 2023 meeting, this body preliminarily found that the Century building meets 3 criteria for Chicago landmark designations. The first was criterion 1 for heritage. From the 1860s through the mid-20th century, retail in Chicago was centered along State Street. As the city and population grew, centralization of rapid transit guaranteed the business and retail dominance of the city's historic center. The 1898 map at left shows the elevated tracks encircling the central business district, used by multiple lines branching out to different parts of the city. Demand for space in the loop exerted pressure on real estate values, leading to the construction of ever taller buildings. Smaller scale buildings disappeared as investors built large scale speculative commercial buildings in their place, eventually giving rise to the skyscraper. The image at right shows the 2 4-story structures in 1903, which would be replaced with the 16-story Century building. The Century building is an outstanding example of a type of multi-tenant skyscraper known as a quote, tall shops unquote building. Tall shops buildings were speculative high-rise structures designed to serve retailers by creating interior shopping streets. Handsome edifices with lavish entries and lobbies were designed to attract and encourage potential customers to enter and circulate through the building. Elegant display cases on the ground floor allowed upper floor tenants to advertise their wares or services. The rendering on the left from a brochure promoting the new building showcases the marble cladding and decorative bronze fixtures of the elevator lobby, and the built-in display cases are at right. On the upper floors, glass corridor walls of tenant spaces functioned like shop windows, as seen in the Oliver & Roche drawing at upper right, of a typical Century building corridor. Free from the vagaries of outside weather, noise, and bustle, this early vertical version of an indoor mall allowed shoppers to move from one floor to the next as they perused goods and services. These buildings were marketed to small and mid-sized merchants, wholesalers, and service providers who desired the advantages of locating on State Street, but for whom costly street-level space did not make economic sense. Tenants enjoyed the advantage of single ownership in terms of scale of operation and building management, while shared amenities within the building, such as restaurants, doubled as a draw for potential customers. The postcard at bottom right shows the mirror walls of the basement level cafeteria located beneath the building's corner drugstore. That corner drugstore was the third State Street location of the Buck and Raynor drug manufacturers and retailers, which had built the Century Building as a commercial investment property. These high-rise tall shops and the more ubiquitous professional office buildings typically occupied compact corner lots on State Street. These tall, narrow skyscrapers contributed to the increasing density of State Street over the course of its evolution as Chicago's primary retail corridor, and together with massive department store buildings, visually dominated the streetscape and created a distinctive street wall with canyon-like views. The commission also preliminarily found that the property meets criterion 5 as the work of significant designers. The Century Building was designed by Chicago architects William Holliver and Martin Roche, both of whom are recognized as innovative practitioners of the Chicago School of Architecture. The Holliver and Roche firm was one of the most successful in Chicago between 1883 and 1927. By the time the Century Building was completed in 1915, the firm was responsible for 5 to 10% of the construction in the city. Holliver and Roche is one of the firms most responsible for shaping the look of State Street after the turn of the 20th century. The Century Building was one in a series of their steel frame, white glazed terracotta buildings, which they became known for, including the now demolished Republic Building formerly across the street at 209 South State, and the extant North American Building at 36 South State, the Rothschild Department Store at 333 South State, and the Waterman Building at 127 South State. Over a dozen of their buildings are designated as individual Chicago landmarks, including the Good Colony, Marquette, and Chicago buildings, the City Hall County Building, the Three Arts Club, and the Palmer House Hotel. The commission also preliminarily found that the Century Building meets criterion 4 for exemplary architecture. The Century Building is a commercial style building which embodies the fundamental components of what became known as the Chicago School of Architecture. Underlying the school were the advancements in construction methods and materials, which allowed buildings to grow taller, exterior walls to open up to allow in more light, and usable interior space to be maximized with fewer columns. At 16 stories, the Century Building was considered relatively tall for its time. Its compact steel frame allowed large openings for windows, and the frame also provided the building's structural support, such that terracotta could be hung from the columns and horizontal beams to create grid across the primary facades. Not surprisingly, Chicago's Loop has the world's largest concentrations of buildings from the Chicago School of Architecture, and the Century Building represents the final years of the movement, generally considered to end with entry into World War I, where emphasis on expression of steel frame construction gave way to the emphasis on verticality and sleek linear geometry seen in much of the following decade's Art Deco skyscrapers. The Century Building displays the high level of detailing and craftsmanship and the late Gothic terracotta ornamentation at the building's exterior. It was one of dozens of new structures built in the 2 decades leading up to World War I, featuring white glazed terracotta cladding. Taken together, they represented the most extensive use of white glazed terracotta in the city. Permits were issued for storefront changes in 1934 and 1944. The wholesale change of storefronts, indeed even entire facades, has been a continuous phenomenon from State Street's earliest days. With the recovery of the economy after World War II, modernization of commercial spaces accelerated on State Street. Home Federal Savings purchased the Century Building in 1948. Non-original storefronts were replaced with a continuous storefront of regularly placed, narrow, floor-to-ceiling mullions, securing large plate glass windows trimmed in stainless steel. At the State Street elevation, glass panels curved to form an S shape, arcing out to align with the front end of the building at the elevation's midpoint, and intersecting with the smooth granite-clad angled building entry at the south end. At the second floor, window openings were reconfigured to centered bands of fixed windows divided by stainless steel mullions aligned with the storefront mullions below. The storefront of the Century Building is an excellent example of the translation of the international style to storefront design. These new open front storefronts prioritized views inside such that the interior commercial space became the display. Tall plate glass windows were employed as both window and architectural form. The Century Building's dramatic floor-to-ceiling curving plate glass storefront trimmed in stainless steel is an example par excellence of these ideas. Oops. The 1951 to 52 remodeling of Century Building's first 2 floors, still intact today, reflects the optimism and prosperity of post-war America, when new was equated with better. Like other financial institutions of the era, appearing modern and efficient was seen as a way to attract customers. And the unadorned, smooth lines of the international style were used to communicate this message. The Century Building's first and second floor exteriors are especially noteworthy as a rare surviving example of a mid-20th century commercial storefront remodeling of State Street. In addition to the landmark criteria, the commission preliminarily found that the Century Building also meets the separate integrity criterion. Viewing the first and second floor exterior alterations as significant in their own right, overall, the Century Building maintains substantial integrity. Absence of the original cornice as seen in comparison photos is not unusual for buildings of this age and does not significantly impair the building's ability to convey its historic character. The terracotta exterior is in need of substantial repair and some replacement, but enough remains intact to provide the essential visual character. And the 1950s storefront itself is remarkably intact. Windows and some granite cladding has been removed, but the reconfigured window openings remain. Photographic documentation and original remaining cladding could inform future restoration work, so these losses can be considered reversible. The commission had preliminarily found that the significant historical and architectural features be identified as all exterior elevations of the building, including roof lines and the first and second floor exteriors remodeled in 1951 to 52. In light of the Century Building's adjacency to the Dirksen U.S. Courthouse and the security vulnerabilities asserted by the federal government, and in order to recognize and provide the flexibility which may be needed to accommodate the 15 reuse criteria provided by the General Services Administration for the Century Building, which were developed in collaboration with the U.S. District Court, Northern District of Illinois, and federal law enforcement agencies, and published in the November 1st, 2022 Federal Register. The following additional guidelines shall also apply to the Commission's review of permits pursuant to Section 2-12740. The Commission shall have flexibility to allow modifications to the Century Building to accommodate the GSA's reuse criteria in order that viable reuse of the building can be achieved. The Century Building is located in the 34th Ward, and Alderman William Conway has been briefed on the proposed landmark designation. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Gwendolyn. Does the commissioner have any questions for Ken? I have none. I don't believe there are any owner representatives here from the GSA or the Dirksen U.S. Courthouse today. Okay. But we have received a brief email from Joseph Mulligan, the program manager for the General Services Administration, and a letter from Rebecca R. Paulmeyer, Chief Judge of the Northern District of Illinois, that I'd like to read into the record. The email from Joseph Mulligan stated, "We will not be in attendance at the hearing. Our past statements to the commission are still accurate with our neutrality on local landmark designation with the NHPA Section 106 process still ongoing." And the letter from Chief Judge Paulmeyer reads, "Dear Commissioner Wong, thank you for the opportunity to provide a brief comment regarding 202 and 220 South State Street properties. Unfortunately, I'm not able to attend the Landmark Commission's December 7th, 2023 meeting in person, and I thank you for reading this letter into the record. As I have explained in the past, my central concern and chief responsibility is securing the safety of the Dirksen Courthouse, our staff, and the thousands of members of the public present in the building every week. We respect the work of the Landmarks Commission and its goal of preserving properties of historical significance. As you know, federal law requires that the General Services Administration, who owns these properties, must consider the effects of any actions they choose to take on historic properties. The process of consideration, referred to as the Section 106 process, is ongoing. Together with GSA, we have been involved for many months with consulting parties in that process. The Section 106 process is detailed and comprehensive. The process is not yet complete. It takes time, and we have made significant progress. For example, tomorrow, on Friday, December 8th, 2023, several members of the commercial real estate community and historical preservation groups will be meeting together during the second charrette part of the Section 106 process, in which various stakeholders brainstorm potential viable alternative uses for the properties. GSA estimates that a record of decision will be made in spring of 2024. The information that GSA is gathering may be of some use to the commission. Your schedule is a matter of your discretion, but the commission may want to allow the federal Section 106 process to be completed before taking these steps. The court remains committed to the following Section 106 process as required by law. We look forward to hearing proposed viable alternatives from participants in the process, alternatives that will meet the 15 criteria that GSA has issued for the use of the properties. We would, of course, report back to the commission after reviewing proposals for viable alternatives that meet those criteria. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you for the work you do to preserve the treasures of our cities. Sincerely, Rebecca R. Palmer, Chief Judge, United States District Court, Northern District of Illinois. In the same way that my report and email and letter I just read reference both the Century and Consumer buildings, I expect that comments from the public may also apply to both buildings. In the interest of everyone's time, I'd like to request that unless the statements are particular to one building or the other, that people who wish to speak acknowledge that their statements concern the landmark designation of both buildings, and I'd be happy to give an additional minute or two in lieu of speaking twice. So I will call for public comments. Ward, you're up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that extra minute too. And welcome, Commissioner Boatright. Glad to have you aboard. My name is Ward Miller. I'm the Richard H. Driehaus Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. It's wonderful to see so many of you here today on such an important issue. You should have a copy of a 3-page letter sent to you from us earlier this morning. We at Preservation Chicago fully support the final landmark recommendation and the Chicago landmark designation of both the Century and Consumers buildings located at 202 and 220 South State in the heart of downtown Chicago. These are two remarkably important and seminal buildings to which our city, nation, and the world have responded to protect, landmark, and reuse. We submit to the Commission on Chicago Landmarks our Preservation Chicago Change.org petition right here to preserve and protect the Century and Consumers buildings for the record. This contains 23,902 signatures with 166 comments and support. It's comprising 550 pages, in addition to 1 million, almost 1.5 million worldwide views of the B1M video produced overseas in London, supporting the recommendation to reuse and protect these buildings, and even to the consideration of landmarking them. So we're grateful to be here today. These two structures are a seminal part of the story of the early Chicago skyscrapers and a system of construction which allowed for buildings to reach new heights due to the introduction of the steel framing system. This construction system, developed in Chicago, is still employed in buildings around the world today, more than a century later. The Century and Consumers buildings were truly a part of this story and a part of Chicago's first golden age of architecture and design. The great architect Ludwig Mies van der Rohe also honored these skyscrapers and methodically placed a Chicago Federal Center building strategically and artistically to further recognize and honor these buildings. The Consumers building framed what was the main entry to the Dirksen building from Chicago's most important thoroughfare, State Street. The Century building aligns with the north wall of the Dirksen courthouse to its west, with the Kluzinski Federal building aligning with the Monadnock building at Jackson Boulevard and Dearborn. Lastly, the Chicago Federal Center opens to the Marquette building. Therefore, these buildings are all one united idea and one vision, and to remove any of them is to remove that greater vision. Architect Dirk Lohan noted in his testimony at the public hearing in November that working with his grandfather, Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, that Mies, quote unquote, Mies learned from these buildings. And also observed by many of us, the Century building's facade and articulation and vertical expression almost foresees and anticipates, if you will, the work of Mies van der Rohe, and the expression of the Dirksen Federal Courthouse building more than 45 years into the future, which is amazing to see them both together. Both the Century and Consumers Building have been part of our Preservation Chicago 7 Most Endangered 4 times in the past, extending back to 2012 and 2013, 2022, and 2023. In addition, our sister partner organization, Landmarks Illinois, made it one of their most endangered in the state of Illinois in 2022 and 2023. And in 2023, the National Trust of Historic Preservation made the 2 structures one of their 11 most endangered in the nation. This is remarkable. It's time to reverse 17 years of neglect and see a positive investment in these buildings and to restore and revision them. We at Preservation Chicago have a vision of a Chicago Collaborative Archives Center, but these buildings could also be used for a variety of other purposes as well. We are also excited about the recommendations of the Urban Land Institute, ULI, to extend the LaSalle Street TIF to State Street. This TIF is said to have a $434 million surplus, plus or minus. And it is our hope that some of these funds could potentially be secured to repair the exteriors and facades and terracotta of the Century and Consumers buildings if the GSA cannot. This would be a tremendous investment in Chicago in the vision of a reuse idea that could include the Chicago Collaborative Archives Center or other development proposals. We at Preservation Chicago enthusiastically support the designation of both the Century and Consumers buildings as designated and protected Chicago landmarks to join that esteemed world-renowned list of our buildings, which are world treasures. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ward. The next person signed up to speak is Joe Lohan. Mr. Lohan, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Wong. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I don't have any prepared remarks, but I would like to express my admiration and gratitude to the 2 previous speakers who have described these 2 buildings and their architectural significance, their beauty, and the reason why they should be landmarked and protected. And that's why I'm here to witness this momentous event in recent years in terms of landmark in Chicago. And I'm looking forward to taking the next steps, or participating in the next steps, which begin tomorrow, in fact, at the meeting that GSA has called together, which I will attend at the Kuzinski Building, to discuss possible uses for these buildings and what could be done. And there is a lot that needs to be discussed, considered, and I find this. I'm a long-time architect in Chicago. I've done many buildings in this city in my career, but this, I think, is probably one of the most challenging and most difficult tasks that's before us as architects, to make them a success again. And that's why I'm here today to support that. And I hope that as you take your vote, it will go the way I would like it to go. Thank you.
Okay. Nobody else has signed up to speak. Is there any further discussion with the commission? Any comments anybody wants to make?
Make a comment.
Go ahead.
I just, my vote's going to speak, but I just want to commend the city and all public advocacy for pushing for this recommendation of protection of these buildings. I think it would be a catastrophic loss of history. These buildings were not creatively, adaptively reused. And so I stand in strong support and appreciation of all the work that has been put out to get us this far.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right. Well, therefore, having nobody else speaking, I'd like to request a motion to adopt the final landmark recommendation to the city council for the Century Building at 202 South State Street. Is there a motion?
Commissioner Green.
Commissioner Hughes, and second by
Second, Commissioner.
Commissioner Ponce. I'll do the roll call. Commissioner Jenkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Boatright. Commissioner Burns,
Yes.
Commissioner Fair,
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes.
Motion for yes.
Oh, thank you. Commissioner Rubin,
Yes.
Commissioner Talbert,
Yes.
and I am a yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. I would like to be the same for the consumers building. I'd like the commission to consider the proposed landmark designation of the consumers building at 220 South State Street. And Kendall, do you make a presentation?
I can believe that's being successfully shared through the streaming. We'll let you know if it's not. So thank you again. Built between 1911 and 1913, the Consumers Building was designed by the firm Lundy and Jensen. The structure is located on the west side of State Street on the block between Adams and Jackson at 220 South State. At the time of its construction, Quincy Street, seen here from above with the Consumers Building on the right, was a through street, and both the south and east elevations of the building would have been street facing. In 1960, the city council passed an ordinance to vacate the western half of Quincy for construction of the Dirksen Courts building directly west, stretching from Adams to Jackson. The eastern half of Quincy became a pedestrian plaza. In 2017, a barrier was put up to prevent access to the plaza. At the April 23rd meeting, the commission preliminarily found that the Consumers Building meets 3 criteria for Chicago landmark designation, including criterion 1 for heritage. This Consumers Building was commissioned by developer Jacob L. Kessner as a speculative professional office building. Professional office and tall shops buildings increased in number after the turn of the 20th century due to the rising value of land on State Street. Typically located at corners and with smaller footprints than department stores, these structures usually reached 15 to 25 stories. Maximum advantage was taken of valuable State Street frontage, so ground floors had large storefronts. Stairs also typically led to basement spaces utilized for commercial purposes, such as the Winter Garden restaurant seen in the ad at right. Floors just above the ground level included large expanses of glass for display or signage, and often stairs located in the lobby provided easy access. Leasing ads for the Consumers Building emphasized the flexibility of floor plans and features with universal appeal, namely plentiful windows, excellent elevator and janitorial services, and of course, great location. Tenant spaces with natural light and ventilation from windows were at a premium, so the developer purchased the property directly to the north to ensure that no building would encroach the Consumer Building's north elevation. By centralizing the elevator core, fenestration was possible at all elevations, and he was able to maximize square footage with windows for lease at each floor, as seen in the photo at left. The Consumers Building is a prime example of a professional office building, which is a distinct building type important to the evolution of State Street, reflecting the symbiotic relationship between retail and professional services and suppliers. Lower floor retail tenants generated foot traffic from a cross-section of the public, bringing recognition to the location and multiplying the reasons to do business there. While specialized upper floor service providers made the building a destination location, with spillover benefiting the retailers. A series of restaurants were established in the basement tenant space, especially during the Consumer Building's early years. Ground and second floor tenants during the 20s, 30s, and 40s were cigar shops, jewelers, and men's and women's clothing stores, such as Howard Clothes, which opened at the corner location in 1936, where it remained until the 1970s. Upper floors contained a wide variety of tenants, including service providers like barbers, tailors, and furriers, retailers of items like carpets and typewriters, manufacturers' agents, insurance companies, and other small entrepreneurs, as well as schools and nonprofit organizations. The commission also preliminarily found that the Consumers Building meets criterion 4 for exemption. The Consumers Building, like the Century Building, is a commercial style building in the tradition of the Chicago School of Architecture. The Consumer Building's steel frame is expressed on the exterior by the grid-like pattern of continuous narrow vertical piers and narrow horizontal spandrel bands. The overall height of the structure relative to its width, plus the widening of piers at the corners of the center of the east elevation, emphasize the vertical to the horizontal elements of the facade. Like the Century Building, the Consumers Building was one of dozens of loop structures built in the 2 decades leading up to World War I, featuring white glazed terracotta. And the Consumers Building displays a high level of detail and craftsmanship in classical revival style terracotta ornamentation of the building's exterior. On the interior, the vestibule and lobby are especially noteworthy as rare surviving unaltered examples of early 20th century professional office building entry spaces. The walls and ceilings are clad in white marble with simple geometric classical revival detailing, and a marble staircase is set into an alcove. Cross beams in the vestibule and lobby ceiling align with pilasters along the walls, and decorative bronze elements include door frames and lobby fixtures like the directory mailbox and sconces on the pilasters. The commission also preliminarily found that the property meets criterion 5 as the work of significant designers. It was designed by the architectural firm of Mundy and Jensen. William Mundy and Elmer Jensen were former partners of William LeBaron Jenney, a leader in the Chicago School of Architecture. William Bryce Mundy served as architect for the Chicago Board of Education from 1898 to 1904 and became a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. Architect Percy Jensen's sense of responsibility to the larger profession of architecture earned him the title Dean of Chicago Architects. And the Tribune noted he was, quote, given about every honor members of his profession in Chicago had been able to bestow. Unquote. Mundy and Jensen were among the handful of important designers enlisted by auto dealers to construct new showrooms in the automobile sales and service nexus of Motor Road, located south of the Loop. 6 of these are extant and located within the landmark Motor Road district. The Consumers Building was one of many loop structures designed by Mundy and Jensen, including the Municipal Courts Building, located in the historic Michigan Avenue district at 116 South Michigan, the Kesner Building at 1-5 North Wabash, the Lemoyne Building at 180 North Wabash, the Singer Building at 120 South State, and the Union League Club at 65 West Jackson Boulevard, all of which are extended. During their nearly 3 decades-long partnership, Mundy and Jensen were one of the most prolific architectural firms in Chicago after the turn of the 20th century, known not only for their leading skyscrapers, but for their industrial, bank, and residential buildings, such as the Clements & Company Manufacturing Building at Division and Home, and the Chicago landmark West Town State Bank Building. In addition to landmark criteria, the commission preliminarily found that the Consumers Building also meets the separate integrity criterion. There have been no major additions or alterations, so the building maintains its overall form, appearance, and that includes window and entrance locations. The missing cornice, original windows, and storefronts are not unusual for buildings of this age. The exterior retains the majority of its architectural terracotta cladding and decoration, and imparts a strong sense of its original visual character, though it is in need of significant repair and some degree of replacement. The main entrance, vestibule, and elevator lobby retain an unusually high degree of integrity and are an extremely rare surviving example of an original early 20th century office building vestibule and lobby. The commission preliminarily found that the significant historical and architectural features we identified as all exterior elevations, including roof lines of the building, and the main entrance, vestibule, and elevator lobby, a lobby staircase to the second floor, and the barrel vaulted staircase to the basement, including marble finishes, walls, and ceilings are included. In light of the Consumers Building's adjacency to the Dirk City U.S. Courthouse and the security vulnerabilities included by the federal government, and in order to recognize and provide the flexibility which may be needed to accommodate the 15 reuse criteria provided by the General Services Administration, which were developed in collaboration with the U.S. District Court and federal law enforcement agencies and published in the November 1, 2022 Federal Register, the following additional guidelines shall also apply to the Commission's review of permits pursuant to Section 2-120-740. The Commission shall have flexibility to allow modifications to the Consumers Building to accommodate the GSA's reuse criteria in order that viable reuse of the building can be achieved. And the Consumers Building is, of course, also located in the 34th Ward, and Alderman William Conway has been briefed on this proposed landmark designation as well. And this concludes my presentation on the Consumers Building.
Thank you, Kendall. Does the commission have any questions for Kendall? Having none, I'd like to also note that the email from Joseph Mulligan from the GSA, as well as the letter from Chief Judge Paul Meyer of the United States District Court were also applicable to this building. I'd also like to note for the record that the public comments that were made earlier were also applicable to this building. If there's no further discussion, I'd like to ask for a motion to adopt the final landmark recommendation to City Council for the Consumers Building located at 220 South State Street. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moves Commissioner Burns in a second. Second, Commissioner Rubin. Do the roll call. Commissioner Jekowitz. No, stepped out. Commissioner Boatright.
Yes.
Commissioner Fair.
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes.
Yes.
Commissioner Ponce.
Yes.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. I'm assuming that's, I'll ask Commissioner Jekowitz when he gets back whether he's in favor, but we believe that it will be unanimous.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is a preliminary landmark recommendation for Apollo's 2000 located at 2875 West Ermac Road. This is in the 24th Ward. Alderman Scott and Matt. It's yours.
Thanks, Chairman Wong. Members of the commission, I'm blind. So the camera's
And here we go. I'm barely sick.
There you go. Oh, yeah, you got it. A little to the left.
Got it. There we go. Fabulous. Hey, little- Yes. There you go.
So thanks, Planners Commission, for your consideration this afternoon, the preliminary recommendation for Apollo's 2000. Historic motion picture theater built in 1917, which makes it 107 years old, which for the past 3 decades has served as a cultural hub to the Latino community of Little Village. It's located at the corner of Cermak Road and South Marshall Boulevard in Little Village, in the Little Village neighborhood of the larger South Lawndale community area. We recommend that the building meets 2 criteria for Chicago landmark designation, including criteria 1 for its ample social and cultural heritage. The first chapter of that would be the history of moviegoing in America from its initial beginnings, and then more recently, the involvement in an immigrant family in saving this building and creating important business in the village. Start with the chapter. In 1917, announcements for a new theater in Cermak Road appeared in publications ranging from New York's Variety to a local Polish newspaper seen here. At the time, the neighborhood was known as Marshall Square, and the theater would adopt this as its name. After 8 months of construction, the theater opened in December 1917 with the screening of Paramount Pictures, His Mother's Boy, and The International Sea. Like most silent film theaters, the Marshall was equipped with a pit for a 10-piece orchestra and a large organ and a female vocalist. Here's a photo of the exterior of the Marshall Square taken shortly after the dedication. The Marshall was built by brothers Lewis and Meyer Marx. Their career in Chicago's cinema business mirrors the development of the motion picture theater industry at the national level. The Marx brothers were early pioneers of the movie business in Chicago when in 1910, they began establishing small Nickelodeon theaters in existing buildings. By the early 19-teens, the Marx brothers had grown successful enough to build their own theaters like this one, the Gold, from 1914. It was in North Lawndale. It was designed by architect Alexander Levy, who the Marx Brothers would employ to design all of their theaters for the next decade or more. With seating for less than 1,000, the Marx's early theaters would soon be too small to meet the growing popularity of moviegoing in Chicago. In 1917, the brothers built the Broadway Strand Theater and the Marshall Square, now Apollo's 2000, at 1,500 and 1,800 seats respectively. The buildings also included rental storefronts and offices, placing them into a new multi-purpose building type known as a theater block. These buildings would also set the stage for the apotheosis of cinema architecture, the theater palaces of the 1920s, and the Marx Circuit built these two fabulous examples, the Granada in 1926 and the Marlborough in 1927, with seating for thousands. Neither of these survive. Indeed, the Marshall Square Theater, now Apollo's 2000, appears to be the only surviving Marx Brothers theater. The later history of the Marshall Square Theater saw it transition from silent films to talking pictures in 1929. In 1956, a larger marquee and neon blade sign were added, now refaced with the building's current name, Apollo's 2000. As South Lawndale transitioned to a Latino population in the 1960s, the Marshall Square began off in the Spanish language films such as El Gato and Mexican Western. But by the 1980s, the supply of new films from Mexico was drastically reduced, which led to the closure of the Marshall Square Theater. The closure of the Marshall Theater in the 1980s was not unusual. Many theaters in Chicago faced this. What is remarkable, however, is the building actually avoided demolition. The survival of the building is credited to Javier and Lydia Galindo, Mexican immigrants who purchased the darkened theater in 1989. In 1990, they rechristened the building as Apollo's 2000 and have successfully converted it to an event and performance venue that has become a cultural center in the Latino community of Chicago. To convert the former movie theater into a performance and event venue, the 1990 renovations included the removal of the original seating. The sloped floor was reconfigured with multiple levels, the stage was expanded, and lighting was added. The overall volume and architectural detail of the interior, though, has been well preserved. In the early years, Apollo's 2000 established itself as a venue for weddings and quinceañeras. In the 1990s, the success of these private events allowed the Galindos to begin programming concerts that appealed to the Latino community at a time when this audience was largely ignored in Chicago. Apollo's 2000 hosted Spanish rock concerts, rock bands Mana and Los Fabulosos Cadillacs, as well as the Spanish pop performers such as Joan Sebastian. Notable Latin jazz artists have also performed at the theater, including Cuban trumpeter Arturo Sandoval. Films, comedy, and private events continue to be part of Apollo's diverse programming. The venue is remarkable for the variety of its programming, including children's theater, lectures by authors, political fundraisers, and support for nonprofit community organizations. Presently, Apollo's 2000 continues to be owned, operated, and managed by the Galindo family and daughters. And they're here, and after years of deliberation, they have decided to request landmark designation from this commission. In addition to the building's cultural weight, we believe that Apollo's 2000 meets the separate criterion for architecture. Like most theaters from the early 20th century, Apollo's 2000 employs dramatic architecture, in this case, a Beaux-Arts exterior and interior, to attract customers with a sense of luxury and escape from the everyday. The architectural focal point of the building is the theater entrance, which is treated as a tall arch framed by square towers topped with domes. Much of the building's architectural interest derives from its terracotta ornament, which was manufactured by the Midland Company of Chicago. The ornament employs Beaux-Arts style, as seen in sculptured eagles, classical festoons, and cartoon shapes. Arguably, the ornamentation is carried through to the interior on an even grander scale. Here's the entrance lobby with its excellent decorative work. Passing through this lobby, one enters the theater auditorium, stage and proscenium framed with full height, fluted Corinthian columns carrying an entablature. The main volume of the ceiling is the flat rotunda framed with a heavily ornamented band. The walls of the auditorium are relieved with panel molding. Though no longer in use, the projection booth retains vintage film cabinets and ArcLight projectors. We recommend that Apollo's 2000 meets the separate integrity criterion well. As a 107-year-old motion picture theater, Apollo's 2000 retains sufficient physical integrity to convey its historic and architectural value. Changes to the exterior include the evolution of the blade sign and marquee, which is shown here. These are common changes to historic movie theaters in Chicago, which frequently updated marquees and signage to stay up to date. I have discussed the alterations to the interior of the auditorium that were implemented in 1990 to convert the space to an event and performance venue. These changes have allowed the building to remain profitable and do not interfere with the architectural quality of the interior. The building is located in the 24th Ward, and Alderman Scott has provided a letter of support for the designation. We have also received a letter of support from Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia, as well as from community organizations, including Latino Progresando and Temple College Community Education Project. We recommend, that the historic, specific historical and architectural features of the building be preliminarily identified as all exterior elevations, including roof lines of the building, the interior lobby leading to the auditorium, and the interior of the auditorium. To these points, we recommend some additional language for your consideration. First, the blade sign and marquee have always been part of the building's exterior elevations. As with many historic theaters, these features have evolved over time in terms of size, material, and illumination. We recommend that the commission's review of work opposed to the blade sign or marquee should ensure that these continue to be featured of the building while allowing reasonable change and flexibility to meet new needs. Second, in 1990, changes were made to the interior of the lobby and the auditorium, including floor finishes, new floor platforms, 3 bars, neon lighting, chandeliers, stage lighting with its ceiling mounted trusses, cameras, screens, and bathrooms. We recommend that these 1990 alterations be excluded from the significant historical and architectural features. And so you have a preliminary landmark recommendation to that effect for you. I'm happy to answer any questions. The Galindo family is here. They would like to say a few words as well.
Thank you, Matt. Does the commission have any questions for Matt? Go ahead.
Just maybe one clarification. I understand from the marquee and the blade sign, obviously that's excluded, but just want to make sure that that is extended to the armature and structure as well, that that's not considered part of the.
We don't recommend that the blade sign or marquee be excluded. We recommend that in future review, that those features have always been a part of this building through several iterations, and that was common for the whole continually evolve. So we recommend that in the future, any proposed changes to the building would recognize that a marquee and a blade sign were always part of it, and they should be, continue to be part of it. The armature, that you see behind and the armature that's holding the Apollo's portion, that was, we believe those were added in 1936. I don't know what that means.
Just to clarify, maybe to ask you, is that considered part of the historic elevation to be preserved, or is that more so consideration for the blade sign itself? So if the blade sign changes, comes to for review, will that also be on the table to change? Flexible? It seems like it needs.
Yeah, you would have the ability to review proposals that would change the refacing.
But not the structure.
Not the structure.
Even the structure, because we noted that the structure that you have there now was from 36. And that there was an earlier structure that existed there.
Yeah.
And there may be considerations with that structure at some point that it's not needed. Or that it's embedded into the masonry behind, and that could be causing issues at some point, so there needs to be flexibility.
So the bottom of this, the two walls coming into here, so. Any other questions from that? Having none, the Galindo family, would you guys like to make any statement?
I can come this week
That'd be
and bring
great.
everyone's
Wonderful.
snack.
Appreciate it.
My name is Evelyn Galindo. I'm the proud daughter of Javier and Lydia Galindo, who, like Matt said, purchased the building in the late eighties and have been operating it since then, so for about 35 years now. Thank you for your time and your consideration of this. I know this is a bit unique, where as the owners and stewards of the building were seeking the landmark designation. But the reason for that is because in speaking with Matt and speaking with other representatives of the city, it's very clear that we are aligned in our mission and our dream for the building. We have been personally committed to preserving the building as is. And one of those reasons is because although we appreciate, and there's no discussion that the beauty of it from an architectural standpoint has a lot of value to it, we really view it as a second home. I mean, my sisters, I have two younger sisters, we all grew up there. So there's a lot of sentimental value. And I think that's not just unique to my family, but to the community as well. A lot of memories have been built in this building, far beyond when we took ownership of it. And we think it's really important to preserve that. So again, we're very much aligned. In terms of the blade, I could actually provide a little bit, maybe shed some light into what our vision would be for the future. And frankly, this is more in terms of the dream, right? If we had a blank check, let's say, our dream would actually be to bring it back to its original glory of 1917. So our goal would be to at some point change the blade sign to what it originally was and even repair the medallion, which in the 30s was one of the beams kind of ran through it in a very controversial way. So again, those are our dreams to one day be able to do that. And again, I think that's in line with what the mission that the commission has as well. But again, our view of this is that a designation as a landmark not only will help us in our mission to preserve the building, but will also bring the recognition that this building deserves. And that it deserves in a community that is oftentimes not looked at. So we have a lot of dreams. We have a lot of dreams for the future of the Apollo 2000, and a part of those dreams include serving as a catalyst for the community, and not just helping preserve the building, but also helping preserve and revitalize the commercial corridor. And I think that the Apollo 2000 can really serve as the catalyst for that. And for those reasons, we'd like to ask that you consider our building for landmark designation and assist us in achieving that first step in our dream for the future.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Does the commission have any questions? I have one real quick question.
Sure.
How many events do you guys do in a year?
Well, you know, since COVID, yeah, since
I would give it.
Since COVID, it's been on a little bit of a decline. So during COVID, we were closed for the entire government mandated shutdown. But our hope is to, again, begin to revitalize it and begin to bring in more private events, but also specifically to begin to bring in events that can help us cultivate cultural diversity within the area. So that's our personal mission. To be able to partner up with different organizations and different nonprofit organizations and also for-profit organizations to bring in programs into the community that will help both the youth as well as seniors who are oftentimes forgotten. So again, that goes more on the personal mission that we have and the vision that we have for the future of the building. In terms of events, as you can imagine, not many people want to get married in February, January. So our busy season is really in the summer. Currently, I would say mostly on Saturdays. It's when it's busy. And I think a part of it is going back to the almost a lack of awareness that this is actually in the city, right? I think a lot of people aren't aware of the Apollo 2000 outside of the Latin community. So it's been very established. It's definitely recognized within the Hispanic community, but our goal is now to open it up to the city so that everyone is familiar with it. And one event we participated in that has shed some light on that has been the Open House Chicago Architecture Tour. And just seeing the variety of people who come in and just you can see the awe right in their face when they walk in. And oftentimes the comment is, we didn't even know this existed. And I think the landmark designation will also help us in that regard to, again, bring that recognition to the building and the community as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If there are no other questions, I'm going to take comments from the public. There's a few of them, so let's get started. Max Chavez. Oh, there you go.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Max Chavez, Director of Research and Special Projects at Preservation Chicago. I'm speaking today to demonstrate Preservation Chicago's support for the landmark designation of Apollo's 2000 theater at 2875 West Cermak, which was once known as the Marshall Square Theater. This building, as we just saw in the presentation, is a really remarkable example of the sort of ornate architecture that was applied to the then developing typology of the movie palace. As movie theaters and vaudeville halls evolved from these sort of informal Nickelodeons into these grand temples dedicated to the art of entertainment, Chicago became one of the great American epicenters for these ornate palaces. And in the decades since their creation, we've lost many of these places to demolition, to population shifts, and to changing entertainment tastes. So while many of our downtown movie palaces have thankfully found new life as Broadway theaters or concert venues, these neighborhood movie palaces have continued to disappear. So when we have the chance to save these places and celebrate them in the many ways that they have enriched the lives of the communities that they serve, we should absolutely seize that opportunity. For over a century, which is a really remarkable amount of time, this theater has brought the local Little Village community together under one roof to be entertained and to mingle together. Landmark designation would honor this place as essential to the local neighborhood and ensure that it continues to provide to the community for many more decades to come. Even more importantly, I think landmark status for this venue would continue to fill in a more equal map of landmark distribution across the city of Chicago, increasing the number of landmarks that speak specifically to the history of the Latino community in our city is long overdue. And I think that this is a perfect candidate for telling a fuller and more detailed story about the many diverse neighborhoods that exist within Chicago's borders. So we at Preservation Chicago, we're thrilled to see this nomination move forward. And we are happy to help and support it in any way that we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Max. James and Pierce.
Hi. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm a friend of the family. I've been a volunteer tour guide for Chicago Neighborhood Tours, Theater Historical Society of America, and the Uptown Theater for several years. When I met Javier, I worked for the code enforcement and review section of the Department of Buildings right here. It's been my pleasure to know Javier and see his work on this building for 20 years. During that time, he's been curious about and has examined the pros and cons of landmark designation. He's thought a lot about it. I'm here to ask the commission and the staff to give him and his family their full support. They are forward thinking and they are planning for the future and what this theater will need to stay viable and beautiful for generations to come. They need both the recognition that landmark designation offers, and they need the technical assistance and other incentives that can come with it. But you may ask, what is different about this place? I'd like to share what strikes me as so different about Apollo's 2000 from other places we point out on tours. So often across the city, we point to places and empty lots and say, this used to be whatever, ballroom, theater, bank, factory. This used to be something. This is a place where we say, isn't this something? How lucky we are for his stewardship and for his family. This place is a beacon. It's where Little Village in Chicago can come together. Sorry. They made an institution out of an old movie theater and kept it shining for 35 years. It has transcended its original single purpose as a movie house and is so much more. I encourage you to give this designation your full support.
Thank you. Kendra Parsons. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kendra Parzan. I'm the advocacy manager for Landmarks Illinois. And my organization also supports landmark designation for almost 2000. This beautiful theater building is an example, as we've already heard, of the transitional 20th century movie theater in Chicago, and it's beautifully ornamented exterior and interior spaces communicate its historic and architectural work. But it is equally and perhaps more deserving of recognition for its recent history as a venue for live music and other programming tailored to the Latin community in Little Village. The current owners, the Galindo family, have been excellent stewards of this building since 1988. Granting this landmark designation will give them assurance that their stewardship of this building will continue, even if for some reason urgent changes someday in the future. And it can also facilitate new financial opportunities to help them continue to care for the building and grow their focus of providing a venue for cultural diversity in Little Village neighborhood. So we commend them for voluntarily seeking this landmark designation, and hope that they can serve as an example to other owners of community anchor buildings across the city, but especially in neighborhoods like Little Village, where historic preservation has not always done the best job of recognizing our shared history. So thank you very much for considering my comments.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ward Miller, the Richard H. Treehouse Executive Director of Preservation Chicago. It's an honor to be here and to support this landmark designation. I have to admit that the Apollo 2000 Theater is already a landmark in the South, in the Little Village, South Lawndale, and Marshall Square communities of Chicago. And this is really a wonderful step forward to recognize this wonderful building, which is also on the Chicago Boulevard system, or I should say just adjacent to it, but actually one side of it does front the Boulevard system, which is a National Register Historic District. This is a wonderful candidate. We've got a whole family that has been stewarding this building for many, many years. It's a great honor to work with them and to have their support in bringing this to the commission. And also, you know, as Max had mentioned, we have very few Latinx community landmarks in our city, and especially in this area of Chicago. So to recognize these types of buildings is really wonderful. And I think it makes landmarks available to all of us. And these are, as I always like to say, world treasures. They're Chicago treasures. And to make it a more accessible, a more viable, a more recognized status to bring in these types of buildings in our communities across the city is so very important. And I think if we had done this earlier in our career, could have seen some better outcomes in some places where landmark designation was not understood fully and comprehended. I also remember the demolition of the Broadway Strand Theater that you saw. The Granada Theater is very close to me growing up. I saw that demolished, also by the Marx Brothers, and of course, the Esquire Theater, which was practically all demolished on Oak Street. So, you know, it's so wonderful to see these kinds of buildings recognized and brought into landmarks. And we also have to recognize this is an early building. This is an early theater from 1917. And, you know, we're also trying to very much encourage the preservation and landmark designation of the Central Park Theater on the west side, in an area that also hasn't seen too many designations over time, on Roosevelt Road in the North Lawndale community. So this is really a step forward. And I just want to commend all of you and the family for your stewardship over time, your willingness to come forward. Andy has been a long time supporter of our movie theaters, including the Uptown and so many others. And fortunately, they've all made it to this particular moment in time, and many of them are considered designated landmarks, or should be. Thank you so much. We and Preservation Chicago fully supports this designation.
Thank
Yeah,
you,
we
Mark.
had no idea.
And for the record, Mr. and Mrs. Galindo have signed up in favor of this. Just so you know. Any further discussion by the commission?
I would like to add
Yes.
that, first of all, congratulations. You know, I'm taking this important step. My parents have talked about this and have gone, starting, you know, probably as early 70s, watching movies every weekend. They would go to the Apollo and just watch whatever was playing, something to do, but it was a weekend thing. And then it is multi-generational, because then I started going for different events and everything. It is a very well-loved community treasure. So I think it's a wonderful moment, and thank you for taking the step to do it. And good luck on the marquee. You know, I hope that you will get there. It's a great move to, you know, restore it. I love that you're dedicated to that mission, and we hope that you know, we can get there.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. That's the goal of dream.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other? Votes?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, man, say a few words. First and foremost, I would really like to thank the commission and the preservation. I feel totally completely overwhelmed, to be honest. I always said the building talks to me, but now you're talking to me. It's really precious. To have 35 years of, I'm gonna say, devotion, concentrated in this particular building. By the whole, not just from who's here, but our parents and siblings, and it's been an endeavor, and for the community itself. I mean, other people have come through there, and you know, when we are able to participate to maintain it, we are totally thankful. But we are mostly thankful at this point for the warmth that we feel from this whole process. Obviously, totally ignorant about the path that we're going to take, the road, the journey that we're embarking on. Andy has been instrumental, very instrumental for the past 20 years. He's been there and he's supported, but there's always that fright, you know, it's like, everybody tells us, everybody, over the 30 years, don't go there. Don't go there because your hands are tied, you can't do anything. But after 30 years, it's like, you know, I don't see what our hands would be tied. You know, it's like we're doing everything that I don't think that the commission would not allow us to do what we're doing. We're just trying to upkeep it, right? And so it got to the point where we have to do something with this. About 4 years ago, I started getting calls from all over. I got about 8-10 calls in 1 year, people trying to buy the building. And it's like, after 30 years, why is this happening to me? Never anybody had showed any interest. So something's going on that I don't know about. But one of these people was very insistent on buying it. Is that after like 4 or 5 calls about, you know, from this individual, he says, well, what would you want to do with it? He was very interested in the, you know, the size and dimensions. What would you want to do with it? Oh, we want to tear it down to build, you know, housing or whatever. Needless to say, I just hung up. I had no more further words for that person. I know I was rude, but I just, it was not even there. The bag, the t-shirt, okay, I just hung up. I said, you know what? It's a total disrespect. I mean, it's in our blood. It's in our blood. You know, you can't tear something. It shows me that you've never been here, that you have no clue what you're talking about. It's not just us. It's not our livelihoods, the history. You know, when you say 100 and something years, there's really something there that ingrains in your system. You know, it really does when you walk into a place like that. Not just the Apollos. I mean, it's an honor to be able to talk with you. Have you listened to us and be supportive of this? I think that our fear has dissipated. I really do. I hope that, you know, we can walk in tandem and for the benefit and the better of not just the building, but for the community and everybody that will come and enjoy it. This is not just a landmark for the village. You know, people all over Mexico, all over Latin America, they know about this building from the bands that, the groups that have been there, the people that, you know, every weekend, their weddings, they cut buildings and they take videos and they take pictures. And I say, you know, we're there and all throughout Mexico. You know, we don't even know who has us in this video or photos, but you know, it is an landmark and people know about it. When we go to Mexico, we come to Mexico, people ask us about it. Wow, this is really special. Again, thank you for your time. And well, we hope to work with you and you work with us.
Thank you.
To make it happen. Okay, thank you very much.
All right. No further discussion. I'd like to request a motion to adopt the preliminary landmark. Oh, yeah, I'm so sorry. Please. Go ahead.
Okay, I just want to commend family, for taking a huge step forward, and you guys are not alone. I like to take a moment to just brag about our staff and the resources that they provide, and them just being an encyclopedia of information and resource for you guys. There's also, when this does, I'm speaking in into existence, when it does become a landmark, that does open up other avenues for you guys to apply for funding and to have other resources available to you as you embark on this journey. And so we want to just encourage you to keep going and to keep being amazing stewards of this building. Buildings like this are why I joined the commission and became a commissioner. Because if you look at our map of the landmarks, we have everything in the downtown area. We have everything in the affluent northern community. And now it's time to spread that equity to our neighborhoods, the Black and brown communities. And so again, I commend you and I support you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. And honestly, I think it's important to also highlight, I mean, Matt Crawford has been also instrumental in the process. And it's been very much a collaborative process, and we look forward to continuing that collaboration.
Yeah. I'm waiting. All right. We request that motion to adopt the preliminary landmark recognition for the Apollo 2028-75 West Cermak Road. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Ponce and Commissioner Boatright is second. All right, Commissioner Jackwitz.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Burns.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Fair.
Yes.
Commissioner Hughes.
Heck yes.
Commissioner Rubin.
Yes.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Congratulations. Next item on the agenda is a report from the Department of Planning and Development for the Jackson Storage and Van Company Warehouse. This is on the 22nd Ward, 3609 to 3611 West Cermak Road. And Commissioner Bowman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So the proposed designation of the Jackson Storage and Van Company Warehouse does not raise any concerns or issues from a planning perspective. So I do not have a formal report from the commission, but I would like to state for the record that I recommend approval of the proposal.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding this site? If not, there are public comments. Mary Lou, you're up.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioners. Mary Lou Seidel, Director of Community Engagement for Preservation Chicago. Not only do we support enthusiastically the landmarking of this building, but we particularly are enthusiastic about Leader-wise engagement with the Lawndale community as they advance this project and their continued commitment to making this a place that serves the current North Lawndale and South Lawndale community and the future community as well. They have been incredibly great to work with. As I mentioned last month, they had approached us, they had approached Central Park Theater about that possibility for a location, and we're thrilled that they found an historic site in the neighborhood that can be landmarked and serve them for the future needs. So really excited about this one and very happy to first be about.
Thank you, Mary. Nobody else has signed up to speak, as there was no report to accept. The action item before us is to vote to continue the designation process. Any further discussion by the commission? If not, I'd like to request a motion to take the next step in the designation process to request consent from the property owners. Is there a motion? So move, Commissioner Fair. Second, Commissioner Jacobitz. Commissioner Boatwright.
Yes.
Commissioner Burns. Commissioner Hughes.
Yes.
Commissioner Ponce.
Yes.
Commissioner Rubin.
Yes.
Commissioner Tolliver.
Yes.
And I am a yes as well. The motion carries unanimously. Right. Permit review committee reports, reviewed at the November 9th, committee meeting. Commissioner Jacobitz.
Sure. The permit review committee reviewed and conditionally approved one project at its November 9th, 2023 meeting. The report summarizing the scope of the proposed project and the committee's decisions was included in your package. This report is for information.
Thank you. And Joyce, you're doing the report? Thank you.
So for the month of November, staff approved 134 permit applications. A total of 156 reviews were performed by staff, and the average number of days to issue the approval or correction was 3.8 days.
Thank you. Any questions, Commission? Thank you. The schedule for the 2024 regular commission meetings, as well as the schedule for the 2024 permit review committees, have been posted and finalized. Dates will be posted on the commission's website at chicago.gov/CCL. If you regularly attend city schedules and meetings are not always on the first Thursday of the month in order to avoid holiday conflicts and bunching up as many as possible. January's meeting will be held on Thursday, January 11th. Take note of that. With that, I'd like to request a motion to adjourn.
Excuse me.
Yes.
You were missing a vote?
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. We did a vote on we did unanimous. It is unanimous. Thank you. So now any motion to adjourn?
So move.
All right. And a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Anybody opposed? No. Commissioner Jacobitz, what time is it? 5 minutes? Mr. Torres, good to see you.
Yes. Lunch of the year.